Judgment Day is upon us, and all of the books that I've read so far in 2025 will be brought to court and will be judged on their performance. I actually have not been sitting in front of the camera for the past month or so because I've been away on vacation, and while I was away on vacation I haven't been reading almost at all. I mean, I read absolutely 0 books in June, which is a crime. And so I'm really excited to be back home, to be honest. I'm excited to get back into my routine. I'm excited to start reading again. And I thought that this tag is just the perfect segue into the second part of the year, where after this break of not having read for a month, I just take a moment to think about all of the books that I did read in 2025 and then see kind of where I want my year to go going forward. So thank you for joining me in this video. I hope you enjoy it, and let's just get talking about all of the books that I read, the best, the disappointing books, my TBR for the remaining of the year, and all of that good stuff. So the very first question is, what is the best book that you read so far in 2025? For this question, I have 3 books that I really want to talk about. I think they're all exceptional books. They're all 5 stars for me, and I'm going to talk about them in the order in which I like them, with the last being my favorite book. So I'm gonna start with my 3rd favorite book of 2025 so far, and that's The Wedding People by Alison Espach. I have not read from this author before. I haven't even heard of her before, and I discovered her when I did a video back in January about the Goodreads award winners, and I believe this book was the winner of the fiction category. So I read it for that video and I was pleasantly surprised. I really enjoyed this book. I think this book is a love letter to life. It's a love letter to human connection in so many different forms, in the form of romantic love, in the form of friendship, in the form of motherhood. It's so beautifully done and so beautifully written. It follows the story of an English professor who is feeling very down in life. She is going through a divorce with her husband who's been cheating on her. She is feeling very unfulfilled, and one of the big disappointments in her life is that she's not able to conceive a child, which she wants dearly. So she decides to herself, and in order to do that, she decides she's gonna book this very fancy luxury hotel that she's been wanting to go to for years. So she goes there with the intention of doing that, but when she gets there, she realizes that she's actually the only guest staying at this hotel, which is not part of a wedding party. So this hotel is fully booked for the whole week for a wedding, and so while she's there, obviously she gets acquainted with the people who are at the wedding, including the bride, including the mom of the bride, including the groom, bridesmaids, the groom's daughter because he's been previously married. And through all of these new connections, she starts to see the light at the end of the tunnel, see life in a different perspective. The theme that really stood out to me the most in this book is the theme of motherhood. I really enjoyed seeing how this author took a whole theme and explored it in so many different perspectives. So it's not just we see the theme of motherhood through the main character who is not able to conceive. Also, we see the absent mother, the mother who is not there, and we see this through the perspective of the young daughter of the groom whose mother is dead, and we see how she deals with the grief of her mother not being there, how she reinterprets her own existence and identity without her mother. We also see the theme of motherhood from the perspective of the bride and her connection with her own mom, where both of them feel misunderstood, both of them feel like they cannot connect with one another, both of them love each other, but there is this kind of disconnect and this kind of impossibility of becoming close to one another for some reason or another. I really enjoyed how this author was able to kind of embroider throughout the novel so many different directions of one specific theme. I think it just shows that she's able to really capture humanity and different aspects of humanity in such a complex way. And I think that just really speaks to her being an amazing author. I have not taken the time to research her, so I'm definitely gonna do that after this video to see if there's any other books that she's written, or if there's any other releases coming up from her, because I'll definitely be reading more from this author. My second favorite book that I read this year is The Call of the Wild by Jack London. This is a pretty short classic. It's actually, I think, classified as a novella, and it follows the story of a dog, Buck, and it follows his transformation from being almost a lifeless domesticated animal to transforming himself into a fully fleshed wild being. And it's the most rewarding transformation that I've ever witnessed in any book. So the beginning of the book starts with Buck living a relatively comfortable life. He's domesticated, he's living on a ranch, I believe, and although he lives a very calm life, it just feels a little bit lifeless. It feels like he's just living for existing and there's not much else going on. Following this, Buck is sold to a couple of people. He goes through a lot of different owners and he's sold to be a sled dog in Yukon. Obviously, this new situation is not amazing for Buck because it's a very dangerous job. It's a very difficult job. It's a job that comes without safety, without comfort, with a lot of abuse from his owners, not a lot of food, has to fight for his food. I really like how Jack London represented what it means to survive and the instincts of survival, how they can be so difficult to match with reason. To give you a couple of examples where that happened, Buck has to make certain decisions when he should rebel and when he should stand up for himself so that he can get food because he's not fairly given food, or some other dogs might steal his food. So it's this kind of process of going through reasoning when is it the best time to rebel so that you get the food that you need to survive, but also when is the best time to shut up and say nothing, because in some instances some owners might kill the dog if he's being too aggressive or too annoying. Following all these difficulties, there's another kind of transformation that Buck goes through, which is more represented towards the end of the novel, where he finds kind of his soulmate owner, where he feels safe, he feels comforted, but not comforted enough to the point where he's completely domesticated and not allowed to exist and to be himself, and rather comforted to the point where he can fully bloom into who he's supposed to be, which is a wild animal. And I think that's where the title of the book comes from, which is The Call of the Wild. I really enjoyed the story. It's such a touching story, especially if you're an animal lover. Went straight to my heart, like straight to my heart. The connection between Buck and one of his owners that I've mentioned earlier, who was the good owner, is just so touching. It's one of those kind of bonds and connections of unconditional love and unconditional trust. No matter what, you could see that Buck would trust this human. No matter what this human would put him through, he just trusts it's the right thing to do because he is being requested to do something because of his owner. And if you have that type of trust and connection with a dog, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And it's honestly the most magical thing. And me being a dog owner, I have 2 dogs, that type of connection just fulfills me and makes me feel like it's almost impossible to have with another human. It's a completely different relationship than a relationship I would have with any human. This book is set in winter, and so if you're looking for a winter classic, this is definitely one that I would recommend. But I would say be careful about the animal abuse in this book, because there's definitely animal abuse in here. So this is one of the reasons it took me such a while to pick up this book, because I knew it was here and I was not ready to read those passages. But I'm glad that I did, because it's a wonderful book and it really just hit me straight to the heart. All right, and now coming up to my favorite book of 2025 so far, 1984 by George Orwell. I picked up this book a couple months ago. I actually did a whole video essay on this book about my experience reading it and my thoughts on the book, a little bit of an analysis on the book. So this book was written by George Orwell, where he imagined a sort of dystopian society in which a communist totalitarian regime would take over and freedom of speech, freedom of individuality is completely prohibited. So people are essentially just living according to very strict guidelines. And in this society, we follow Winston, who's actually a government worker, which is a very interesting choice of characterization by Orwell, because it provides us with a lot more information on the society than we would have had with another character who does not have this type of clearance or this type of perspective on what is going on. But even though Winston is part of the government, you could see that there's still so much he doesn't know about, first of all, who is in power, who is ruling them. There's so much ambiguity about the ruling party, about how they came to be, about what was before, about the present itself. Something that really surprised me in this book is the extent to which I consider it to be a psychological novel. A lot of people, characterize this book as being historical and political, and that's absolutely 100% the case. But it's also very much psychological. Orwell, I think, explores really well to the extent to which a totalitarian regime could impact someone's psyche and someone's emotions, and how that trauma gets internalized and almost changes someone's perspective, someone's reality, someone's memories. An example that comes to mind is Winston thinking about the concept of love. In this society, love is, I would not say illegal, but I mean, it's pretty illegal. You're not supposed to marry someone that you're attracted to. You're not supposed to show too much affection to other people. Human connection should be very utilitarian. It should only be for the purposes of serving the government, acting as a surveillant. So there comes a point in which Winston is falling in love with a woman, and he starts to kind of recontextualize the meaning of the word love. And he recalls, for example, the first time that he ever felt love from his own mom. He recalls a certain video that he saw of a mother loving a child. And it's just this beautiful kind of going back memory lane and reliving memories that he's actually suppressed for such a long time, to the point where he didn't even remember what love was. There's a lot of beautiful things in here that I'm not gonna spend too much time talking about. If you're interested, go and watch my video. I really go in depth on all my thoughts. But my favorite thing that is done in this book is what Orwell did with language. So a lot of people, when they think about what language is, the first purpose that comes to mind is language is a means of communication, a tool to kind of communicate, put in words what you are thinking. But what Orwell is arguing here is actually language is so much more than that, and that's why it's so important that language is not restricted by the government. Essentially, his argument is that language is thought. There's a lot of different ways in which this is portrayed in the book, and one of the major ways is at the beginning, Winston starts to question. He starts to think about the society in which he lives. And this only starts to happen when he utilizes language in a very specific way, and that is through writing. Writing is not allowed in the society, but he decides to write in a journal. And by doing so, he starts to reason through some of the things he notices and observes in the society, and he starts to ask himself questions about what it is that is happening. So he really starts to go on this quest of silent rebellion only when he utilizes language in the form of writing. Anyways, I'm gonna stop yapping because this video is gonna be too long. I could talk about this book for hours, but if you're interested about these themes in a little bit more detail, go and check out my video. I absolutely loved my time reading this, annotating this, thinking about this. It was a wonderful work of art, and this is really truly what literature should be. It should be a place of not just writing a story for the sake of writing, but it should be a place where we can think about what it means for us, what it means for the future, what it means for the past. And this was just that type of book for me. Question number 2 is, what is your favorite sequel of 2025? And I have 2 books that I want to talk about as well. So the first book that I want to mention is part of a trilogy written by Abby Jimenez, and it's yours truly. Part of the Part of Your World trilogy. This is the second book in the trilogy. All of these 3 books in the trilogy, they do not have to be read specifically in order. So although it's a sequel, it could be read as a standalone. It would not impact your comprehension of the story if you hadn't read the first book. However, I read all 3 of the books, and I just highly recommend you read them all in order because it just enhances your experience. There's little nuggets that you would not be able to get unless you had read the previous books. So highly encourage you to read them in order. But this is the second book in the series, and it follows a love story between Brianna and Jacob. Brianna is a doctor, and she is going through a very messy divorce with an abusive and cheating husband. She is also dealing with some family issues. Her brother is extremely sick, and she dedicates a lot of her time taking care of her brother. And then she meets Jacob, and they go through this fake dating type of situation, but eventually, obviously, they end up catching feelings. I do think some of the scenes in here were a little bit too stretched. Like some of the fake dating scenes were just put in there to make the story go forward. I feel like in a real life situation in which two people were really just fake dating, I don't think they would have went to the extent of doing some of the things these characters did. But nevertheless, I thought it was a really cute story. I really enjoyed reading from both of these perspectives. I really enjoy Abby Jimenez's writing. I love how she writes characters, both the female characters and the male characters. I feel like she just gets humans and she's able to write a human in all of its complexity, and I think she's a really talented writer. The next sequel that I want to talk about is The Hero of Ages by Brandon Sanderson. This is part of the Mistborn trilogy in Era 1, and this is actually the last book in the trilogy. I have been putting this book off for so long because I just didn't want to finish the series, but I did it, I read it, it's done, and I'm so happy that I got to enjoy this beautiful series. I think it was probably the first epic fantasy series that I've read. I've read fantasy before, but I just wouldn't characterize it as epic, and I just love Brandon Sanderson's creative worlds. I don't want to give you a synopsis of this because obviously that would spoil books 1 and 2, and so I don't want to do that for anybody who's interested in reading, and you should be interested in reading, you should read it. But what I will say is I just find his books and his stories so grand. I feel like he's such a talented writer, and one of the reasons why he is because he is able to connect you to a story, to make something relatable to you. In the first story, we just follow people who are similar to us, who are living on a planet that is similar to Earth, similar to our understanding of the world, while also obviously bringing in fantastical elements. And so he starts with these very human-like issues and challenges, and then surely but slowly in other books, in like books 2 and 3, it just starts to kind of move away from just it being a relatable human level story, and it just becomes so grand about the world and about the universe and about the origin of the universe. I have to say that the ending was not my favorite ending of all time. I don't think it was the perfect ending for the series, in complete honesty. I did see some of the things that happened in the end coming. There was just something that was a bit too predictable for me, but I loved it either way. The whole series is just such a grand, beautiful story that I just cannot not love it. I'm currently making my way through a couple of his standalones because I don't want to move too fast into his next series, and then I think I might pick up Mistborn Era 2 maybe next year. Okay, we've talked about wonderful books. Let's get into some books that were not as good. So the next question number 3, is what are your biggest disappointments of 2025? And I'm gonna start off by talking about this book, which is The Witch and the Tsar by Olesya Salnikova-Gilmore. This book is supposed to be a reimagining and retelling of Baba Yaga, which is a figure from Russian folklore. So the author contextualized the story of Baba Yaga in this book in 16th century Russia, where Baba Yaga has connections with the Tsar and the Tsaritsa, Tsaritsa being the Tsar's wife. I heard about this book that it has beautiful descriptions. It's set in winter a lot of the time, and so I was really excited about those beautiful winter descriptions and getting enveloped in a fantasy, like cozy fantasy story for the winter. But I really just felt like this book tried really too hard. It's very true that there are beautiful descriptions in here, but they came across as the author just trying to achieve a sort of checklist of words that she was trying to put in here, or type of descriptions that she thought would be marketable. That's how it came across to me. And so the whole story to me felt very unnatural. Something else that I really was disappointed by was the characterization of Baba Yaga. So if you're not familiar with the concept or the figure of Baba Yaga, she's supposed to be this old lady, quite ugly, long nose. She's supposed to be kind of mean and eating children and like almost an unlikable character. And I was so excited to see how she would be able to take that character, who in itself is very complex, and maybe deconstruct it and see what are the elements that made her become that way, or kind of just delve into an exploration of a great character. I think that would have been so amazing, but rather what she did in this book is take a very lazy approach and just be like, oh, all of the stories that you hear about Baba Yaga are actually not true. She's actually a beautiful young lady who has beautiful black hair, and she's just amazing in every way, and she's super kind. And I'm like, well, that's great, but that's not who Baba Yaga is supposed to be. So I just don't understand why she took the name of a figure from Russian folklore if she wasn't gonna use any of its characterization to actually tell her story. She just essentially wiped all that off and came out with a completely new character. I thought that was extremely lazy. It essentially took away all the interesting aspects of Baba Yaga. I think that's also a little bit insulting. It's almost like, oh, I cannot write a good story about a woman if she's not beautiful and she's not pretty and she's not the most kind person. It's like, in order for a woman to have her story told, she needs to be like this perfect being. It could not be a little bit more of a grayish character. I think that's quite lazy and not a very realistic viewpoint on how humans are. No woman is perfect and no man is perfect, and so why not just take a character that is already so interesting and just make her real, give her, you know, emotions and give her her own trauma and try to explain her to the reader. I think that would have been amazing. I was really not impressed with this. I think it's a book you can skip. The second book that really disappointed me this year is a book that I did not have a single doubt in my mind that it would be a 5-star for me, and it just ended up being one of the worst books that I read. And the book that I'm talking about is Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairy. I have read a book from Heather Fawcett before. I've read The Ember and the Ice Dragons last year, and I really enjoyed it, and so I had quite high expectations for this book. Everyone seems to love it. So it follows the story of a young scholar, a female scholar who is studying fairies, and she's going to this specific country in which fairies are found very frequently in order to study them and to write an encyclopedia about them. The premise of the story sounds really fun. I thought I would really enjoy following a young scholar in this kind of wintry wonderland. I thought that sounded great, but when it came to actually reading the story, I just found that it was a little bit boring. There's not much else that I have to say about it except the fact that I just did not care about anything that happened in this book. The stakes were also not that high, so that also maybe played a role in my boredom with this. Overall, I just couldn't connect to Emily. I couldn't connect to her story. I just didn't really care. So it makes me sad because it was a book that I for sure thought would be like just top tier for me, and it just wasn't. So it is what it is. The next question is whether there's any new release from this year that I haven't read yet that I'm excited to read. I do not really follow a lot of new releases. I don't follow really books that will be released in the future. I kind of just try to stay in the present as much as possible because I have so many books on my TBR. They're like, my shelves are filled, and so I'm just trying to get through my physical TBR as much as possible and just read from the authors that I already know what their books are and their backlist is. However, there is one book that I've heard about, talked. I don't know if it's out yet or it'll be out maybe at the end of the summer. I'm not exactly sure, but it's a book that I'm having my eye on and I'm thinking about picking up. If not this year, maybe next year. And I'm talking about Abby Jimenez's Say You Remember Me. It follows the story of Xavier, who is a vet, and one day a young lady walks into his office with a cat who I think has been in an accident, and following this encounter they decide to have a date, and they have the most wonderful time on this date. But the woman, who I cannot recall what her name is, has to move away to take care of her mother, and so both of them are kind of dealing with the difficulties of being so far apart and separate from one another, and just kind of reminiscing on that beautiful first date that they had. The premise itself does not sound too interesting to me, to be completely honest. I'm never too interested in anything that has to do with romance, but it's just because I've read 3 of her romance books at this point, and I really enjoy the way she writes characters and she puts stories together. So I'm just excited to read it whenever I'm gonna feel like, oh, I just kind of want something very easy. When I'm gonna be in the mood for a little romance, I know this is the one that I'll be reaching out for sure. The next question that we have is, what is your biggest surprise of the year so far? And I have to give it to Far From the Madding Crowd by Thomas Hardy. The reason why this book really surprised me pleasantly is because I actually never heard of Thomas Hardy before. Like, I've heard his name in the past, but I knew nothing of him. Like, I had no connotations or associations about him in my brain that I was like, oh yeah, this is what he's known for, or this is how his stories are. I knew absolutely nothing about him. So I went in this story with really kind of a blank slate and just zero expectations, and I really enjoyed it. So we follow Bathsheba, who is inheriting a farm, and she has a very interesting love life. She is being courted by 3 different men, very different men. We have a poor farmer, a kind of very handsome soldier, and then a very good-natured man who is living in the village and has a little bit of money. So we follow her on this difficult journey of making decisions about her love life and making mistakes about her love life, and it's the most crazy story towards the end. Towards the end of the book, it really reminded me of Wuthering Heights. I think it's just as crazy, just as toxic. I absolutely loved it. I think it's so fun. I think this book was probably written as a cautionary tale towards women, like what are some of the red flags you should look for in a man, what are the type of good decisions you should make when it comes to the type of men that you're gonna date, stuff like that, which like I'm not really too interested in, to be completely honest, but I just thought it was a fun story towards the end. Although on the whole I did enjoy the story, I do have to say that the writing took me a while to get into. I found his writing really complex and kind of too hard for no reason. Like, he writes such long sentences, paragraph-long sentences, to write something that could literally be explained with a subject, verb, and an object, and that's it. He just really uses words, like he is letting you know he knows his vocabulary. So that took me a couple of chapters, I don't know, maybe 50-70 pages to really get used to his writing. It was really pissing me off at the beginning, and I really thought I might DNF it, but I guess I got used to it, and towards the end, the action, I think it's really worth it. The next question that we have is, what is your new favorite character or your new character crush? And the answer for this question will have to be Shy from The Emperor's Soul by Brandon Sanderson. So this is a collection of some of his shorter works, and here I have The Emperor's Soul, which is a novella by Brandon Sanderson. It's a standalone, and it's a beautiful story about Shy, who is a forger. Forgers have magical powers to kind of inscribe in stamps information about objects or about a person. The moment the stamp is being used, it would kind of recreate a copy of the painting or the structure or the person that has been stamped with their information. Shy's task in the story is to come up with a forgery of the Emperor's soul. The Emperor was severely wounded, and he is essentially brain dead, so he can no longer do anything, and the people from his party obviously want him to keep remaining in power so that they themselves can continue to rule. So they task Shy with creating the Emperor's soul, and that's a very challenging task, as you can imagine, because Shy has to study the Emperor through his journals, through people who know him, so that you can put together all the pieces of information about his soul, about his personality, about his thoughts, about how he would reason certain things. And it's a really interesting and creative story. And I just really love Shy because she's such a strong female lead. She's so resilient, she's so smart, she's so creative. She's not afraid to speak up, but she's also the mirror in certain moments. And I just loved her, and I loved reading from her perspective in this novel. The next question that we have is, what is a book that made you cry? I do have to say, I have not cried at a book in probably over a decade. I'm not a crier. Obviously, I do get emotionally invested in books, but I guess it just never happens to be so much of a connection to the point where I start crying. But it did happen this year. I did shed like a tear or two, and that is for this book, The Call of the Wild. I just really connected to the story of Buck and one of his owners. It just kind of brought me in all my feels and made me reflect on my own connection that I have with my dogs, and that's all I have to say. I just kind of started sobbing. So the next question, now that we talked about something sad, is a book that made me happy, and this is a book that I finished very recently, and it was such a good, heartfelt book. I read recently The Blue Castle by Ella Montgomery, and it was the perfect kind of cottagecore, easy, breezy kind of summery book. I just loved it. It follows the story of Valency, who is a 29-year-old who lives with her mom, and all of her life Valency has been hearing from her mom as well as her huge family who she should date, what she should wear, what she should do. At the beginning of this book, Valency gets the sad news that she's being diagnosed with a very challenging heart condition, which probably means that she will die within a year. And this makes Valency reevaluate how she sees the connection that she has with some of her family members. Now that she knows she does not have to live the rest of her life with them, she starts to kind of realize that she does not have to live according to their rules anymore, and she can just do whatever she wants. And so this story just follows her making her own decisions and do whatever the hell that she wants to do. She gets a new job that is obviously very frowned upon by her family. She makes a new friend. She meets a guy that she is interested in. I have to say that the first 50% of the book is pretty slow. In my opinion, it could have been edited out so much more, because it's just kind of very repetitive with her family just being judgmental, etc., etc. But the second part of the book is really where the story picks up, that I really enjoyed. In the second part of the book, we start to get the beautiful nature descriptions that Ellen Montgomery is known for. Overall, this is just like a good, heartfelt book. It made me really happy and just all good vibes. The next question that we have is, what are the most beautiful books that you've acquired this year? And I have two that I want to talk about. For my birthday this year, I got this beautiful edition of The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas. It's a very beautiful hardcover. I love it. It has the golden edges, and I like that the pages are very floppy. Obviously the book is not floppy because it's a hardcover, but the pages themselves, I feel like they're the perfect width. Does that make any sense? To the point where the pages themselves are so floppy, and I'm just so excited to have this and to add this beautiful classic to my collection. I do not know when I'm gonna get to it, maybe next year. I'm so happy that it's on my shelves and I have it ready for whenever I will be ready to pick it up. I got this book like about a month ago, and I'm so happy I found this beautiful edition. It's the most gorgeous edition of Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. The cover of the book is probably a painting that has been used as a cover. It's just so gorgeous. It's so wintry. It's kind of depicting four little women walking to their house, I assume, in the countryside, and it has the most beautiful wintry landscape. I just love the simplicity of this cover. The inside of it is also very pretty. It has some pages in which some of the quotes are made to stand out like this, and I think that's so gorgeous and wonderful. And actually, the next question that we have is, what is the TBR for the rest of 2025? And so I'm just gonna keep holding this book, because now that I've acquired this book, this has jumped on top of my TBR, and I'm so excited to read this. I will of course be picking it up in the winter, because it starts with the most wonderful scene during Christmas, where all of the four sisters are celebrating with their mom, and they receive a letter from their dad. I don't know if I'm going to be finishing it this year. Maybe it's gonna lead me up until January or something, because it is pretty huge, but I'm so excited to pick it up this winter. This will be my little winter classic. I already made a whole video where I talked about my TBR for the summer, so I didn't want to include for this question any of the books that I talked about for that video, so I'm just gonna talk about two other books that I want to read following summer. Reading during fall is one of my favorite activities, and so I have two books that are a little bit more dark, just so that it fits a bit the vibe. The first book that I have, which I'm thinking to pick up maybe towards the end of September, is The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches by Sangu Mandana. This book has been making the rounds on YouTube, and I've heard stellar reviews where everyone just talks about how cozy it is, how atmospheric it is, and that's just really what I'm hoping to get out of this book. It follows the story of a young witch who goes to take care of a couple of children, and I believe she's teaching them magic. I think there's also a romance going on in this book. I honestly don't know too much about it, and I'm just happy to go into it that way. The next book that I want to show you is a classic. Every single Halloween season, I try to read a classic that is a bit dark, a bit gothic, and for this year I want to read The Phantom of the Opera by Gaston Leroux. I cannot believe that I still have not read this book yet. I honestly don't know very much about this book, aside from the fact that it's set in the opera house in Paris, and there's this man who is haunting the opera house and who is being mysterious and kind of making noise, and people are scared of him. I don't know anything else, but I really enjoy going into most of my classics not knowing too much about. I think there's something so special about knowing that a book is so loved, such as this classic, and then going into it and just kind of experiencing firsthand for yourself everything that there is to love about this book, rather than knowing already what happens or what people love about it so much. I think probably because I already know that in general I just love classics, I'm comfortable going into them knowing a little bit less about their premises and about the themes in there, because I will most probably like them anyways. So we've made it to the end of the video. I am very happy that I made this video. It really kind of made me reflect a bit more on what I've read so far and what I'm trying to do with the remaining of my year in terms of reading. As I said, I haven't read any books in June, and so I'm really excited to get back into it in July. So yeah, this has been good. I really enjoyed making this video. I really hope you enjoyed watching it. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you in the next one.